everyone is doing well and is happy and healthy. So today's lesson is going to be on how do we deal with fractions when solving equations. And most of you might be screaming right now, Miss Wood, can't do this. I am done. I promise you, this is super easy if you're using your Desmos graphing calculator or Desmos scientific calculator. So the first thing you need to do is make sure you have a piece of paper to show some work on. As you can see, I have an extra workspace. And make sure that you have opened your Desmos calculator. So as a reminder, you should have it starred here. So it is the Desmos scientific calculator, desmos.com/scientific. Make sure it has a little blue star filled in right here. Kind of super important. You're going to be using this a lot. So this is really important for today's lesson because I want to talk about fractions. So in elementary and middle school, you had to solve fractions by hand. You had to understand when you had to have common denominators. You had to understand when you had to have change it to a mixed number or an improper fraction. You had to understand all of those processes. Now that we're in algebra, the expectation is you know how to do those things. And so for those of you who have struggled all along with figuring that out, you are just going to be using your tools. Okay, I am a very strong proponent, that means I'm for it, of using a calculator. So let's say the problem is 3/4 x minus 2/3 x. Well, you would look at this and go, okay, this is a variable term, this is a variable term. I need to add these two together because we always add our like terms. So you're going to go to your calculator and you're going to be like, all right, I got to add these fractions. And you're going to panic at first because you're like, I don't know how to add these fractions. I'm done. I quit. No, it is simply the use of this button right here. Oh, it didn't like me there. Okay, I don't know why. It is use of this button right here. Excuse me. So again, it was 3/4. So you click the button first, and then you're going to put 3 at the top and 4 at the bottom. Who cares what the answer says? Now, if you notice the cursor, let's zoom in. See, the cursor is at the bottom. If I continued typing, so I said plus -2/3. That looks really confusing, and it should look really confusing because it doesn't look like your fraction math, that the statement that was written. That's because the cursor was still on the bottom. This is incorrect. You need to make sure when the cursor is on the bottom, there are 2 ways of doing it. Either you are going to push your right arrow over, or, so the right arrow pushes it there, or, and the left arrow brings it back to the fraction. You can use up and down from there. Or, you're going to use your cursor and just click on it to the side. That is the #1 most important piece of putting fractions in. If you don't push that right arrow over, you're going to make a mistake. So then, because we're combining like terms, we're going to do plus. You put your fraction button, -2/3. Oh. Now, if you tried to write down this answer, I would say, please leave it as a fraction. If the problem has fractions, your answer should be in fractions. So to do this, you are going to click this Convert to a Fraction button. And the answer is not 1/12, it is 1/12 x. So let's go to solving some equations. There are several different ways of attacking this kind of problem. So the first way I'm going to teach you is to distribute. Oh, back. Pen. Red. Okay. So option 1 is to distribute. Now you have to be able to justify which method you use. Okay, so I don't really care which one you choose to use. They will all work out nicely. Sometimes there's a reason one works over another. I think the number one reason students like to use the distribute option here is because it makes sense, it's recognizable. So when we're solving multi-step equations, we should remember that we don't chase vampires, or we don't chase Victor. So it's distribute, combine like terms, variables on the left. 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 Okay. So if we're distributing, we're actually going to be doing 9 times 1/3. And we're going to do -36 times 1/3. Why are we not distributing all the way to the other side? Well, number one, there's an equal sign, and we only deal with one side of the equation or the other. We can't cross either side of the equation without doing the opposite operation. Number two, this is not inside the parentheses. So you can't distribute to something not inside the parentheses. So that's two reasons why we only distribute the 1/3 to the 9 and the 36. So you could use a calculator for 9 times 1/3. So we clear all. 9 times, our cursor's in the right spot, AB, 1/3. And we would see that that is a 3. So this 1/3 times 9c is going to be 3c. Then we could just change this 9 to a -36, and that's a -12. And now we solve it the rest of the way the same. So box the variable term. Everything outside the box, we're doing the opposite operation. We're moving the constants by doing the opposite operation. Trust that your math, as long as you write everything correctly, this is going to be a -9 plus 12, which is going to be a +3, and you bring down your 3c. You're going to divide by 3, and you're going to find that c is equal to 1. So the first option is to simply distribute. Now I'm going to show you that this math works the same for all of them. So ideally our answer is going to be c equals 1 for each one of these. Now let's say, all right, I just want to get rid of my fractions altogether. There are two ways of looking at this. If by the way, if the distribute method makes sense to you, please use it the entire time. It will always work. Each of these methods will always work this way. I just want you to be aware that there are other options. Okay, as long as there's nothing else hanging out here next to our parentheses, I can rewrite this statement so it looks like a proportion. So I can write this as 1 times 9c minus 36 over 3 is equal to negative 9 times 1. Now this is very similar to the other grouping symbols, use of grouping symbols lesson, where then this is option 2. You can think of it like a proportion. Now I would recommend this only when the numerator is 1. Why is that? Because 1 times 9c is 9c and 1 times 36 is negative 36. So you don't have an extra step in this. It's simply just rewriting the problem. If you were to have a numerator there, that's going to be slightly different. So, but I want you to see is if you solve it like a proportion, this is super easy. From here. So again, it's this times this. So 9c minus 36 is equal to this times this, which is going to be 3 times negative 9. 3 times negative 9 is going to be a negative 27. So we have 9c minus 36 is equal to a negative 27. Add 36 to both sides. Nine c is equal to a positive 9. Divide both sides by 9. C equals 1. We got the exact same answer. However, the process was completely different, and that's okay. That's kind of one of the things that I like about math. So option 2 in solving this is to treat it like a proportion. And remember, if the distributing method works well for you, distribute. If the proportion method works well for you, use the proportion method. Remember, I tend to only use this when the numerator is 1. The last version, and again, I'll show you that this will give you the exact same answer, is to get rid of the fraction first. So can anyone, well, I would say this if I were in a real classroom. When I used to teach dividing fractions, I actually used the phrase multiply by the reciprocal. This is option 3 that I'm going to say, which is multiply by the reciprocal. Okay. So to get rid of this, we're simply going to multiply by the reciprocal. Now you have to know what the reciprocal is, and you do. You've just heard it in different ways. It's flip. Okay. So all you're going to do is multiply both sides by 3 over 1. Again, this works as long as there's no extra term hanging out here. When you do this, these cancel out. You're left with 9c minus 36 is equal to negative 27. which that looks a whole lot like the proportion format, and it is. We're going to then add 36 to both sides. You get 9c is equal to 9, divide by 9, and you're able to see that c is equal to 1. So the three different methods that I find that work well for these problems with fractions is to, number one, distribute. Number two, proportion. And number three, multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to go through a couple of these and tell you why I would use it. On this question, I would multiply by the reciprocal. Why? Because I find that if I were to distribute, that I would make a mistake by forgetting to multiply it by the second term. So for me, multiplying by the reciprocal makes more sense. So I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, and whatever I do to one side, these now cancel out. I have to do to the other. So I only have one fraction I need to multiply by. So I have 4x plus 8 is equal to, I go to my calculator and I do negative 12 times 4/3. Negative 12 times AB, 4/3. And it's a negative 16. Then, box my variable term, subtract 8 from both sides. 4x equals a negative 24. Divide by 4. X equals negative 6. Now, by the way, if you are not feeling confident solving two-step equations at this point, the best thing for you to do, instead of watching me solve this, would be to pause your video, try and solve it on your own, and then watch the video after I've done it. You'll then be able to compare any mistakes. So the number one mistake, what you might have done is added 8. If you add 8 here, or if you put it into your calculator, a negative 16 minus a negative 8, that is going to be a wrong answer because that's going to change this to a plus sign. That is not correct. What you had to have put into your calculator is either negative 16 minus 8 or negative 16 plus a negative 8. Please notice there is only one negative sign. There's only one negative sign. Oh, wrong way. Okay, next one. So here I would have kept the negative safe. And again, I could choose to distribute this, but it may be problematic. I could choose to set it up like a proportion, but remember the proportion option I only like when the numerator is a negative or is a 1. So I'm not going to do the proportion option. Step number 3, or option number 3, is to multiply by the reciprocal. Multiply by the reciprocal. And that's the option I'm going to go with again. So whatever I do to one side, this is the reciprocal is 3 over negative 2. I'm going to multiply this by 3 over negative 2. These cancel out. I'm left with 6x minus 9 is equal to negative 34 times 3 over negative 2. So negative 34 times AB 3, oh, I hit it twice, 3 over negative 2. Then it's 51. Okay, 51. If you are not confident solving two-step equations at this point, I need you to pause the video. Try and solve this equation on your own. I'm talking to you. Hit pause. Okay. We're going to box the variable term first, add 9 to both sides. Bring down our variable term. That means we're going to bring down our 6x. Equals 60. Divide by 6. X equals 60 divided by 6 is 10. Did you get the same answer as me? Good. Okay. We'll try and do this one as I'm going to put the negative on the bottom. And the reason why is I want to keep the 1 by itself. I'm going to use this one as a proportion. That's the reason why I looked at this. We're going to solve this one like a proportion. So the negative 2 is going to go to the bottom. So we're going to have 4b minus 2 on top, negative 2 on the bottom. 5 over 1. This times, or is equal to this. So 1 times 4b minus 2 is simply going to be 4b minus 2 is equal to negative 2 times 5 is a negative 10. You try and solve this. Pause the video now. Okay. Box it. Opposite. Oh, that's getting ahead of myself. That's a 4 there. B is equal to a negative 2. Okay, so when dealing with fractions, you have 3 options. You can either distribute the fraction. Please use your calculator. You can either treat it like a proportion, just like I did here, or option 3 is going to be get rid of that fraction as long as it's by itself and multiply by the reciprocal. Make sure you do your homework, and I will see you soon.